Hello and welcome to the virtual screening of the Vixio Workspace launch. This is the live footage taken from the event that took place in London on the 29th of April. Whilst this isn't a live event, you still have the opportunity to ask questions of our experts, so do please feel free to pose these questions in the chat box. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome everyone to the official launch of Vixio as Workspace. It's a new frontier of regulatory change management. I'm delighted to see so many of you here today, so thank you for joining us. I'm Dalia, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Vixio, but today I just want to take a few moments to talk about environments. We spend more time interacting with screens than ever before. From the moment we wake up to the moment that we sleep, they are our constant companions, our working environment and our tools for connection. For compliance professionals, the environment has become increasingly complex. Multiple systems, endless alerts, regulatory documents, risk assessments, attestation, all critical, all consuming mental time and energy. The compliance tools we've used weren't just functional objects. They've shaped how we work, how we think about regulation, and ultimately how we perceive our own roles within our organisations. But these environments, they weren't built with intention, they weren't designed with intention. They have evolved as reactions, as band-aids applied to growing regulatory demands. They weren't built to empower, they were built to cope. So what if we could change that? And what if we could build a new environment that transforms how compliance professionals work, not just today, but for years to come? There's no such thing as an intuitive interface for someone encountering it for the first time. Every tool requires learning. The challenge of compliance isn't just the complexity of regulations, it's the complexity of how we interact with them. 90% of compliance leaders say compliance complexity is hindering their ability to actually implement and maintain IT systems and manage data effectively. We've accepted this complexity as inevitable. We've built more complex tools to manage the increasingly complex requirements. But complexity doesn't have to mean complicated. For nearly 2 decades, Vixio has committed to taking the heavy lifting out of regulatory monitoring. We've offered comprehensive, actionable intelligence on compliance across 180 jurisdictions worldwide in highly regulated industries undergoing rapid and radical change. And now it's time to go further, today with the launch of our new intuitive regulatory management tool, Vixio Workspace. Workspace doesn't eliminate complexity. It actually embraces it and then transforms it into something that actually means something. It allows us to actually take action. We've spent hours and hours talking and listening to compliance leaders on how they actually work, not how process diagrams actually say they should work, but what actually happens in the messy reality of regulatory change. We didn't start with a solution looking for a problem. We started by being available in response to what compliance teams actually really need. The most powerful changes aren't always the most visible ones. Sometimes the smallest, most thoughtful interventions create the most profound transformations. Workspace doesn't reinvent compliance. It doesn't add more noise to an already noisy environment. It makes 3 fundamental changes. It connects intelligence to action through seamless workflows. It creates a space where all stakeholders can collaborate. And it makes complexity visible, manageable, and auditable. These 3 changes transform how compliance feels, from burden to opportunity, from reaction to strategy, and from isolation to integration. We don't just build for today, we build for tomorrow, and we build for impact. We know today that the average financial institution spends about 10 to 15% of their operating costs on compliance. And from our own research, the average compliance professional actually spends 70% of their time on, and some of our sectors actually up to 95% of their time on reactionary tasks rather than on strategic guidance. This isn't just inefficient, it's unsustainable. Vixio Workspace isn't just another tool, it's a new environment, one that will shape how compliance evolves over the coming decade. When we build tools like Workspace, we're not just creating software. We're creating environments where people will spend hours and hours of their professional lives. We know that that carries responsibility, and it means we need to ask, what kind of environment are we actually looking to create here? And what kind of work do we want to enable? And what impact do we want to have? With Vixio Workspace, we've built something that doesn't just make compliance easier, it transforms compliance into what it should be, a strategic advantage, a source of confidence, and a catalyst for growth. This is Vixio Workspace, and this is compliance transformed. Today, we're excited to unveil Vixio Workspace to you, and over the course of the afternoon, you'll have the chance to meet industry-leading experts. We'll begin today with our Chief Research and Data Officer, Roseanne Spagnuolo, who will host a fireside chat with industry experts, bringing us 3 core user cases that divulge the practices and challenges of managing regulatory change, sharing best practices and how to get the most out of technology. Our Chief Product and Technology Officer, Stephen Lovell, will take you on a journey through the Vixio product roadmap to show you what to look forward to from Vixio over the coming year. And then we'll give you a first look at Vixio Workspace by way of a live demo from our Senior Product Manager, Emma Donnelly. And then it's your chance to ask your questions with a Q&A session before enjoying some well-deserved drinks and networking downstairs. A final point from me, today's launch is really testament to Vixio's commitment to collaborating with you, our customers, to implement innovative solutions to solve your most pressing compliance challenges. So thank you, and thank you for joining us today to embark on this new frontier for regulatory change management. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Roseanne.
I want to introduce the panelists because I'm joined by a powerhouse today of, sorry for the gents in the room, but they're all women. And I think we'll have a great conversation. So I first want to introduce Jennifer Aguila. She is the Chief Compliance Officer at DraftKings, and she's also the winner of the 2021 Global Regulatory Awards Chief Compliance Officer of the Year. Please join us up here. Welcome. Next, I'm going to introduce Anushka Thompson, who has spent over a decade in financial services, no small feat there, and navigating multiple policy changes, government changes, etc. Please come and join us.
Decade.
Yeah, I'll beat you on that one. And then last but not least, Burjit San, who is a former regulator, is now an independent consultant to the gaming industry, and who also is a recipient winner of the Global Regulatory Awards Compliance Lifetime Achievement Special Award of 2021. Please join us. Great, I told you we have a powerhouse. We're going to discuss, as I said, sort of some of the challenges and, just going to get myself comfortable up here, some of the challenges and experiences from three practitioners, really, in your own right, so across sort of the gambling industry, the financial services and fintech, and then actually, Anushka, you were from the FCA too, so you've got a regulator kind of hat that you can tap into. So it's going to be quite an interesting conversation. Let me start by saying, Jennifer, I'm going to start with you, right? So Been at Vixio now for about 5.5 years. Before that, I've worked with compliance and risk management professionals all through my career. And I think the conversation every year is how, things are so difficult. It's quite laborious. It's manual. We don't get enough investment. They don't value us. We're back office, kind of teams and functions. And I think Dahlia played it really, or said it really well around the tools that we've been using have kind of defined us rather than the other way around. And they've shaped what we do and how we do it, sometimes not always for the better. I'll encourage you all, if you've not heard of Dan Heath's book called Upstream, it's basically about how do you solve problems before they arise. I think one of the key points that he brings out in that is problem blindness. And I think we're experiencing a bit of problem blindness with the tools that we use because we've accepted that that is a fait accompli and that's just how it is, and therefore we don't try to do anything about it. So with that, Jennifer, in your experience, what makes regulatory compliance burdensome and laborious?
So in the gaming space, and I come from years in financial services as well. So in the gaming space, I think it's the volume of regulations. So we always say at DraftKings, each state is a snowflake, so every state has its own take on their requirements, and we have multiple products, we have multiple jurisdictions, so the sheer volume of regulation is astronomical. I didn't have that experience as much in the financial services space, so trying to keep track of that, getting the business to, one, be aware of all of the requirements that apply to them, how they apply, the volume is just unbelievable. And I've said this before, and those that have been in several panels have probably heard me say this. We use spreadsheets or Google Sheets for everything, and I hate spreadsheets. I hate them. It's just the bane of my existence. And then trying to manage all of that through spreadsheets has just been absolutely inefficient, ineffective, and just really laborious. And that's I would say, the biggest challenges that we face there.
And then on the flip side of that, if you could kind of have a clean slate, what would good look like?
I think good or great looks like a clean regulatory library where I'm able to map controls to all the regulations. Not only controls, but keywords is something that we use, as well as each department that is impacted by the regulation should know what the regulations that apply to them are, how their controls are mapped, and they're getting a dashboard or reporting to show how they're complying with those regulations. So that to me is what great looks like.
And I think, and that's really important too, because what you just described there was you are a service provider to the business. They're your customers, and how do you make their life easier and give them the information that they need?
100%. And I think the big difference of good to great is this notion of moving from reactive to proactive management. I want to be an advisor to the business. I want to be, giving them the ability to make money, and not cost them money by getting fines or anything like that. So I want to be a conduit to help the business thrive, and it has to be the shift of being, proactive versus reactive, we have to have been in the past.
And that's where compliance, I think, can shift from being a pure cost center to one that's enabling competitive advantage.
100%.
Great. Anushka, I'm going to come to you to kind of put a FS lens on that, right? So if you think about kind of what Jennifer just described, how would you describe regulatory compliance in financial services? Is it burdensome and laborious? What would you add?
Not at all. No, so I haven't got the comparison that Jennifer gave in terms of, the gambling view, but financial services, I think, is dealing with, we're at that crux point where we're dealing with a divergence of regulatory interventions. We're moving more and more to principles-based, which is so much harder to make firms understand those types of grey areas. I used to work for a firm, and they were always like, Anushka, I just need a table. I need to know, what we're supposed to do, when we're supposed to do it, and by when. And I was like, oh, no, that's not quite how, UK and European regulators work. So I think, there is a lot of volume. There is a lot of velocity of, reg change. And also, I think you talked about it and Dahlia talked about it as well. We're all using tools I hate Excel spreadsheet to do things like this, but it's siloed, it's not efficient, they don't talk to each other, and it looks very cookie cutter when a regulator comes in, and that's not great because, as we all know, we're supposed to be able to pivot back to our products and services and not just have this kind of one-size-fits-all approach. So they'll be like, okay, what did you do for this regulation? And then you'll be like, here's this worksheet. And then we'll be like, what did you do for this regulation? And it's like, oh, well, here's another. Yeah. And, sometimes we'll have it all in one workspace, and they're like, So I think, and again, I think, we all work for firms that operate in multi-jurisdictions, and trying to deal with that complexity, with, minimal resources and budget allocated to this, critical task, I think is something that I'm sure we can all have empathy with. So I'd say that's pretty similar. Yeah. I think, from a financial services perspective, and I don't know if it's the same across the piece, conflicting regulations and that divergence is probably our key thing going forward.
Thank you. And I think that point around sort of the spreadsheets, the multiple spreadsheets, and different people doing it different ways, right? Everyone has their own way of doing it, can create its own complexity and complications. And then never mind when you have to kind of prove to the regulator that you actually have a systematic way to do something. It kind of all blows up at that point, maybe. I don't know. Thank you for that. I do just want to come back, Brigitte, before I come to you, I do just want to come back to the FS gambling, because we've talked quite a bit about that, Jennifer. And what do you see as the differences in those two sectors, having worked in both? And why do you think those things are challenging for compliance teams?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things that I found as a difference is in the gaming space, we've been able to actually influence change in regulations, which is a big difference in financial services because they're pretty baked. So you try, but they're pretty baked, and we've had that opportunity. So I think that's one positive difference. I think there is a lot of similarities, though, across both. I find you're dealing with people's money, so you're in both places. So the regulations do kind of cross over. I think the difference that I see that's on the negative side is the velocity. I think the changes in the gaming space are astronomical. It's continuous change. We get emergency regs, then you get temporary regs, and you get final regs, and then they change a year later because the regulators are still not fully seasoned with all of these requirements, especially in the sports betting space. So the velocity is huge. I never had to keep up with that in the financial services space, so it's something that I've had to adjust to, and it's very difficult to maintain that reg change process in a seamless manner, given the velocity of change.
Yeah.
So it's been a big challenge.
Yeah. And also different jurisdictions will flip-flop, won't they?
Yes.
I think Italy is now starting to look at allowing advertising again in gambling after banning it for so many years. So I totally, that resonates for what we hear with customers as well. Brigitte, I'm going to bring you in at this point because you bring a very interesting perspective. Not only the fact that you were regulated.
I run for the door now.
You've been on the regulator side. You now are a consultant to many
I didn't do it. I didn't.
That's your get out of jail free card. And I think you have quite a unique perspective to see how different organizations operate across the gambling space. In your opinion or your experience, what is preventing organizations from doing what good looks like, how Jennifer described it? What's getting in the way?
First of all, sorry. So good to be here. And I'm so delighted that Vixio actually invited me after 12 years as a regulator, right? I mean, you can feel the burden on my shoulders, just sort of like endless changes, out of the blue. Totally recognize it. So really, well, it takes two to tango, right? So obviously on the regulatory side, as mentioned, totally recognize inaccurate forms, if any, inaccurate guidelines, inaccurate legislation, insecurity all in when, how, what. And obviously also sometimes not even reachable. you can't even get into contact and ask questions, right? So in many ways, it's a hard world sometimes. And on the other side, also as a regulator, you can get frustrated too, because really when you try to sort of explain, you talk with key people taking care of legal, and they'll just sit like that, and you know behind them is a full organizational structure doing a lot of other stuff as well. And compliance is not always on the top of the list. And of course, they can't share that with you, right?
Yep.
They have to be loyal. But deep down, it's about also making good odds, right? And making money, right? On all other corners as well in the business. So really, you do know as a regulator that it's not easy. And so really, I think it's amazing that we're actually now getting a management tool where we could unite somehow. When I say we, I'm not a regulator anymore, but regulators, the regulatory world, and the good guys, as I like to call all those that actually try to be compliant. So we are actually getting a shared kind of language now, right? We will have a tool that we can dig into from both sides, so to speak. And to me, we've always been on the same side, all of us wanting to be compliant, really. So it makes a lot of sense to me that we will obviously carry on using Vixio, but just also making use of the workspace. And I think it's like this, right? So if people sort of start off saying, well, we've used the Vixio Workspace, you know, and you can sort of say, oh, well, that's not a bad place to start, right? Because my colleagues and myself use it as well. So we're speaking sort of like on the same line. So I think that in itself is a good thing. And then, you know, coming to London, you need to listen to this sort of like see it, say it, sort it, right? So I thought this could be sort of like read it, share it, and sort it, right?
Yeah.
So somehow I think this could be the tool that could actually do some good, and quite round the corner, really, literally. So I'm quite positive about it, all in all.
Cool, thank you. And I love the shared language, right? Kind of working from the same hymn sheet and speaking the same language. And if a tool can empower that, that's great. And I think, you know, kind of just to wrap off this part of the conversation, we just got to be bolder, right? As Delia said, we just can't accept things as they are because they are. Let's test things and just think differently and creatively about how we do things. On that note, I guess, Jennifer, coming back to you, organizations, again, we've been approaching regulatory compliance for ages now. What is it, how do you see that it's evolved and changed over time?
Well, the volume has come in, so that, but I do feel like we haven't maybe evolved as quickly as I would have like hoped or thought. Again, you know, up until very recently using spreadsheets for everything, you know, that inefficiency has lingered. You know, I've investigated a ton of systems throughout my career at DraftKings, almost 9 years now. And I think in general, there's not a lot of options. A lot of companies that I've worked with or talked to, they didn't want to make the investment because the population of, you know, gambling operators are small, so it's not worth it for them to actually like spend the money and the time to create something specific, because we looked at a lot of financial services vendors and whatnot. So I think that was a challenge where we haven't made as much progress on the technology side, and quite frankly, personally, I drafted up requirements and I begged my product and tech teams to actually build something for me. Well, I'm not the fun, sexy project, so I didn't go very far. So, you know, those are the types of challenges that I think we face just because, you know, we want to create efficiency, be quicker, faster, you know, more organized, and just finding the right, you know, tooling has held us back a bit in that space.
And I think we talked a bit about too, like, you know, compliance is you're the focus area when something goes wrong. And then, you know, as that kind of comes to an end, you're falling off. But I think the point to get people to invest in you is that they need to see the evidence and the benefits right before the investment. It's almost counterintuitive. And once they see that, right, then you can get the tools, your tech department will come ask you for ideas on what tools to build. So it does change the wave there. Anushka, coming back to you, like anything, when we think about kind of tooling or how do we do regulatory compliance well, there's sort of, when we look at efficacy and efficiency, there are 3 levers typically that we can pull, right? One is the people, right? Do we have the right people in the right roles? One is the processes that so our ways of working, and then the other is the technology. And so as you think about those 3 levers, can you give an example of something that you've seen that works really well, some sort of innovation or a different or smart way of doing something?
I mean, other than Vixio's tool, which, as you know, we do use all the time. No, I mean, I think AI does offer us that opportunity to be able to do that, but I think people also need to be clear on how they're using it. So, it provides that, opportunity to be able to synthesize information and vast amounts of information very quickly, but it will not replace what our people do. And I think I always come back to, when we talk about investments in tools and products and tech, one of the ways that, I have used Vixio and I currently use them is actually to upskill the team. I think it's so important to be able to enable our teams in order to be able to be like, this is what's coming down. And being able to share it in a format will be super useful, and having that audit trail that we all know regulators like, and internal risk and control departments as well. So have I seen something other than AI? No, not really. Okay. And I have seen AI used in varying degrees of success. I have seen people put a lot of emphasis on it. I too also tried to introduce something to the product and tech teams and be like, let's do something, let's build something. But as you say, it isn't sexy enough. I think AI does offer us that opportunity to be able to leverage off that. So I'd say that provides us with an opportunity. But no, otherwise you're looking at more areas where people just synthesize information and have that kind of sharing areas, but not really. I don't think there's been anything game-changing personally in the last decade and a bit since I've been in financial services, and certainly nothing that would, as you talked about earlier, move compliance departments into that proactive added value.
And I think it's because of problem blindness.
I think it was a really good way. Had I not got my pencil earlier, that's why I would be writing down.
That's right. The AI is a great point, and I am going to come back to that in a second. So hold your thoughts on that one. I am going to come back to the AI. Brigitte, I do want to go to you, though, and just talk about the Workspace tool and kind of thinking about what it does. From your regulator perspective, right? We're putting your regulator hat on. What would it need to have? What would it need to be able to do, or what things would have to be true for it to satisfy the regulator that the organization is tracking regulations sufficiently, reporting, documenting, and attesting to their compliance?
Well, door again. No, really close to perfection, really. In the sense that if you want to be sort of totally aware what you risk, you have to be close to perfection if you will argue up against the regulator. That you're using this and that tool and you're absolutely certain that you're on top of things, right? It has to be, you have to be quite certain that Vixio is up to date, right? So number one would obviously, for most regulators, I hope all of them, really would believe that their own communication channels, right, would be the number one, would be the most fantastic stuff for everyone to look at, right? That's where you get the news about the jurisdiction and the requirements and so forth. That's where you get what you need if you only look once a day, right, or whatever, or every hour. But the fact being, right, that nobody really always do that, right? Or even if they do so, it can change 5 minutes later, right? So I believe that if Vixio should really be as great as it looks like now, it should really keep up actually being on top of the news, right? So if I was a regulator being met with Bally telling me, we've done everything in our power, you need to kick off saying, we've checked your channels, right? And we also use Vixio Workspace.
Yeah.
I think that's the fine way to do it, because then you sort of don't eliminate the number ones. That regulators, they just want to hear that. They just need to hear that. But the fact being that they not normally deliver that many tools for you to use, right? You can just sit there and read it. You can sit there and read it and maybe understand it, and maybe ask questions, maybe get some answers, right?
Yeah.
But that is what Vixio can do for you. Can sort it out in a better way, make it more approachable, and make it easier to organize. So what I love about Workspace space is really that you can have quite complex gambling news sorted in a more organized way.
Yeah.
And you don't need to sort of get up from your desk and go out there and ask people, did you read the latest stuff? And have you heard this and that? And, oh, I will give you a copy, right? It's sort of like, are we living in the middle age?
Yeah.
So I think, really this is a welcome new tool where we don't have to sort of cross down the halls and ask people about this or that. You can just immediately, when you read it, you can just share it, right?
Yeah.
And you can actually ask people to have a second look. So some of your colleagues are on it 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant, because really, as you said, I mean, we're living in a time where we're being bombarded with changes, right? And so really being able to sort it the minute you read it, because 5 minutes later, we're doing something else.
Yeah.
We're reading something else. So we need to react to act on it, because we're probably not getting back to it the same day again. So that's why we need at hand a tool that can actually make things happen immediately, and not sort of like put it on a side and then read it again and ask someone next day.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of it, I think.
And I think just to echo that, I think, the organization of the data and helping you organize the information, right?
Yeah.
I think what customers will say often is that Vixio filters that, right? So the stuff that you do get, and then to your point, I need to action it now because I'm going to be distracted by something else, right?
Absolutely.
You all talked about the velocity and kind of pace of change. So that's a great use case. I think building on that, Anushka, as you look at Workspace for proactively managing regulatory change and sharing that information with relevant stakeholders, what could that look like in your organization?
So I think I was lucky enough to be involved in an early view of the tool. And I actually called it, it's a really good communications hub, So yes, we use it as a radar. Yes, we use it for horizon scanning, and we really use it extensively for that.
Yeah.
But it isn't just a tracker. It does have that element, and it's great for that, but it is a communications hub, as you say. So I can disseminate information globally, in an almost real time. As soon as it comes through to me, as soon as I've opened it or read it, we're not relying on emails. We're not relying on sharing documents or PDFs or Word documents, this is talking about way back when, but when you print, as you say, articles and put them on people's desks, it eliminates, all of that. But I think also just strategic projects. So, one of the things that we've used it for is to look at when we're going into a new market, what people need to be aware of, and what they need to be considering. So, when you're setting objectives and they're like, okay, well, we're going to go into 7 new markets, Anushka, and I'm going to be like, okay, well, the regulatory timeline of that is 12 to 18 months and not a year, so we need to look at things like that. Or we need to prioritize different markets that have a shorter lead time.
Yeah.
And I think, that's something that we can use this tool for, and we already use Vixio, but not perhaps in that one space format. And also that single source of truth. And I think that's something that you talked about, going back to the regulator, that's one of the key things is instead of having multiple spreadsheets that have different risk appetites, different interpretations, globally or European or across whatever jurisdictions you work at, it's being able to kind of have that single source of truth, manage the tasks, look at the deadlines, look at the dashboards, and more importantly, if I speak to one more regulator, apologies to those in the room, that, talk about, okay, Anushka, give me some MI, but then also not only that, the MI can't just be presented to the regulator, it needs to go through governance bodies, it needs to go through boards, so anything that helps me do that, and the Vixio guys know this. I've been using their kind of email alerts that I get once a week in terms of these are the trackable actions.
Yeah.
But, having that kind of real time, at the drop of a button, I think will be amazing. So yes, hopefully that's
Oh, thank you. And I think
some ways that we've used it and that I do use
it's
it.
fantastic use cases. And I think the point around the strategic projects and kind of setting the expectations with internal stakeholders maps really nicely back to what you started out with, of how do we serve our customers better, right? How do we make their lives a bit easier? And just giving them information like that can help them kind of make their own plans, right? And think about the impact on operations or go-to-market or what have you. Jennifer, as you think about Workspace and for managing a project like entering a new market, and also thinking about managing stakeholders against deadlines and delivery, because I think that's also something where the sharing capability comes in. You know, what could that look like at DraftKings?
Well, I think one of the key benefits of Workspace is, you know, creating a playbook, right? A repeatable playbook. I'm all about consistency, creating a playbook. Generally, when we're going into like a new U.S. jurisdiction, the playbook is the same. So, you know, having a tool that can help like structure that and have, you know, have the same process over and over is huge for me. That is different when we go into maybe other jurisdictions, but again, having the playbook for something like that is huge. Tracking people's deliverables. We're a global company, 5,000 plus people all over the world, and being able to, one, share the information like you both have talked about, sharing and communicating out, but also then tracking to ensure that we're getting folks to pay attention to it, that they're completing their tasks, that we're reporting on that. That's key, just given our global nature. Because it's important. We always want to be first to launch, and people have to be on task and really, you know, meeting the dates or beating the dates, and having that ability to, one, send reminders, send information, and you know, really keep track of where they're at is a huge benefit of the tool.
Yeah, and I think that first to market is really important, right, from a commercial perspective. And I think to your point around the standardized playbooks, it's just a great way to onboard new people into the organization, right? So their
100%.
trajectory is not as steep, and it gets you there faster, right?
100%.
On that. Excellent. I'm going to come back to the AI thing now because I think it's really interesting, and I do think, you know, Anushka, I agree with you that it's probably the thing that will be the game changer, right? Brigitte, though, I want to ask you, right, kind of with anything like AI and kind of still, it's really ramped up over the last 12 to 18 months. It is now at the forefront, I would say. I think we did a survey at Vixio and we said, how many of our employees, raise your hand if you're using AI in any kind of your work life or your personal life, and I think everybody in the business raised their hand. So it is top of mind and people are using it. With organizations starting to tinker with it, right, to manage regulatory change, there's always a place for technology if it's used in the right ways. And so I'd love to hear from you as you think about specific use cases in responsible gambling, for sure. But how do regulators feel about it more broadly? And what would they need to see to be satisfied that it's being used in a responsible and transparent way?
Right. One of my favorite. So obviously, I mean, now this is the new black, right? I mean, we get from time to time new stuff, and then everybody says, oh, I'm using that, I'm into that. But the thing is still, you know, you will always, as a regulator, get a little bit suspicious if the first argument you get is sort of like, we've used AI, right? It's sort of, yeah, absolutely great. Did you use your mind? You know, so you need to really have this connection with the tools you use, whatever you call it, at all times. You know, in a few years, we'll have another tool that is even more fantastic because really the AI is too slow and actually deals with too few data compared to what we can do in a minute. So we will always see those tools develop, but it wouldn't really impress me much if I sit across with people like yourselves and you tell me we based it all on AI, you know, and we can prove the data, it works like this, and I was told like that, and you know, I need to know that you have a human eye on things, that you have been reconsidering what the system shows you, and that you've made adjustment so that it will actually deliver what I expect you to deliver, right? And so in that sense, I'm an optimist. I think it should be absolutely support your business, absolutely. But I think we should use it with a bit of a caution, but make the best out of it, right? Yeah. And absolutely use the tools that we're now getting. I mean, it's a gift to all of us. And I would like to add, really, as a regulator, I mean, you might not believe it, all of you, but regulators can be very ambitious as well. and they will like to also be proactive. It's not always that they just have a hard time being defensive and sort of like, I didn't do it. They also need to stay on top of things and be proactive in the sense, if Vixio don't tell them what's happening out in the world, well, if we don't have a source where we can actually read about what UK is now up to, then we don't have the best of days, right? So we need to know what's happening in the world so that we can adjust our regulation and our guidelines accordingly, and so that we can actually reconsider, right? So this or that is giving operators problems or payment companies problems out there. Yeah. So maybe we should sort that out ourselves. We might have exactly the same challenge according to the news coming from Vixio, right? Yeah. So I think as a regulator, it's obviously a good idea to use Workspace as actually becoming more proactive. And that way, it will really help regulators also support industry in the best way. So again, coming back to the fact that I think Workspace will bring us even closer on the same side, because it will be a management tool that will really be effective if we know how.
Yep. That's great. Thank you. Anushka, just coming back to you for final comments around AI and compliance.
And I think I touched on it earlier. It's the why that's really important. It's the why that matters. So, you know, we need to use it. Absolutely. I think it's great, as I said, to kind of, you know, synthesize the information, but you need to make it trusted and usable in order for a regulator to know that you've done your due diligence, I guess. And so the why is, you know, really important as to what changes have you made and why have you done that and why it's important. And I think, you know, being able to track that is hugely important as well. I was at, so for those of you in the UK know that it's UK FinTech Week, so I've been at a number of events with IFGS and PLS, and I heard this, so it's the quote and it isn't me, but I heard this quote this morning and I thought it was great, and it came from either a regulator or an ex-regulator. And he was like, you know, let's stop relying on slow and outdated technology in order to limit risks. Exactly. You know, it is the stability of the graveyard, and I think that's what it is. So I think the regulators are very much trying to use this themselves and trying to find a way that's workable. So I think us using it is great, but it comes back to how we're using it and what we're doing with our people to make sure that what's coming out of it is validated and based on the right information going in.
Yeah, and I think it does lend itself to efficiency, right? It can read things way faster than we can if we think about the length of regulations coming out, and also speed, right? To help us get to market faster, help us get to new product development, et cetera. Jennifer, you've had some serendipitous luck in your organization around AI. Do you want to tell us that story?
Yeah, we just did a hackathon. I think that happened after we talked, but we tried using it for a reg library, and it sounded like it would be very easy to do that. It did not work out so well. You know, it just couldn't handle the volume of the data. We were really trying to do what I said earlier, which is like identify keywords or different things that we could sort the regulatory requirements, and it's just not there yet. Or at least the tools that I was using or we were using weren't quite there yet. We did get some wins after that, though, and we were working with our tech teams because as I'm learning, there are a lot of AI tools that I did not know were available. Like ChatGPT isn't the only thing, and creating these bots and everything else is fascinating to learn. But we're still working through trying to come up with some of the basic stuff. But what we found was it was really giving us incorrect information, which was really scary. And we can't be wrong in this space. So that's where you have to, like, from a regulatory perspective, it really... That's the thing that scared me the most, and it's going to take a while before I think we can really embrace this, because we have to make sure it's right.
Yeah, there's no room for error.
There's no room for error.
No. Good. I guess just to summarize and wrap us up, you've heard from our guests today around challenges, opportunities. I think a lot of kind of parallel thinking and kind of similar challenges despite the sectors and industry. And I think some good anecdotes. I guess what I took from this, sort of 3 key takeaways. One is something like Workspace can revolutionize how you manage regulatory change simply by being one communications hub, right, between you and the regulator and you and your stakeholders across the business. 2, because it allows you to share things, you can action it immediately, right? There's no, I'll come back to it later and then you forget about it. We can all admit that's happened a couple of times. And then I think 3, with AI, it is imperative to keep testing and to make sure that it is a hybrid solution that does include humans in the loop, right? I don't think that as much as AI will improve, I don't think it will ever be a case where we will start working with robots and kind of code alone. So because there is no room for error really when it comes to regulatory compliance. So good. With that, thank you very much for your insights. Pleasure to be here. Okay, we are now I'm going to invite up my colleagues, Stephen Lavelle, who is our Chief Product and Technology Officer, and Emma Donnelly, who is our Senior Product Manager. And they are going to take you through Workspace, the tool, take a bit of a deep dive and share some of the features and functionalities with you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for that panel. I've just had to cross out loads of stuff in my speech because you covered everything, so thank you for that. So I've been frantically changing, so I may have to refer to some notes for a little bit. So hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I am Stephen Lovell. I look after product and technology at Vixio. I've met some of you, hopefully I'll meet some more of you today. I'm super excited today because when I joined just over a year ago, everyone shouted at me, oh, we need a workflow tool, we need a workflow tool. I just kept hearing those words shouting at me. And actually I took a bit of a step back and spent time talking to lots of people, and Workspace was born, although it wasn't called Workspace when we sort of came up with the concept, but Workspace was born. And we started to use this phrase like built by compliance professionals for compliance professionals, and I know that's a bit cliched, but we do actually mean it, because as you've just heard, we're lucky in that we've got access to lots of very, very clever people who are at the heart of the problems we're trying to solve. And so what we've tried to build is in direct response to that, and hopefully we've done that. And hopefully it reflects the fact that we try and share the challenges that you face, and we also share the ambitions that you have. And hopefully this tool will help you give you that. And we talk about enabling you to navigate your way through an increasingly complex regulatory world. One of the biggest sort of things that have come out of all those conversations is, when you're building something like this, you can't build a one-size-fits-all tool because organisations structure themselves differently and they have different teams and different departments and they're doing different things. And so we've tried to keep it really, really simple, and we've tried to keep it really, really intuitive. And although there is structure in there, we've tried to make it flexible so that you can all adapt it to what you need. And that's why we called it Workspace, because it's your space. It's our tool that we're selling, but it's your space to do what you need to do with it. And that's kind of where the name comes about. And I think it really does fit the fact that it's not designed to dictate how you work, but to fit into how you work. And I think that's really, really important. That said, we've got lots of people at Vixio in the account management teams who are very able to help you set it up in the right way. So please, if you're going on a Workspace journey with us, reach out, talk to us, because it will be different for different people. So like I said, we kept it simple and intuitive. You can get started straight away. There's no lengthy configuration. We literally set you up and you can get going straight out of the box. And for day one, you can start folding it into those workflows that you have already. using the features you need when you need them, and that's really important. There's not lots of redundant stuff that can hang around. You use what you need to do, and as you grow and your needs evolve, the product will evolve with you. Because I think today, whilst we're launching the product today, this is the start of the journey, not the end of the journey. And as we go through the next few minutes, we'll show you what's there now, and we'll also talk about what's coming in the immediate and slightly longer term future. So we're not just launching this tool for you, we're inviting you to help us build the best tool that we can possibly build. And I think you heard from the panel, everyone's crying out for it. We can't do it without that feedback. So we need your ideas and your challenges, and that's going to help us shape where Workspace goes next. And our ambition is that every update that we roll out feels like it's the solution you asked for, because it kind of is that. I think just in terms of what the panel were talking around AI and the use of AI, I just wanted to kind of sort of talk about how we're approaching AI from a product perspective within Vixio. We've launched a few things so far. So we've got, so at the back office, our analysts are all using an AI tool to help them sift through the big lots of noise that comes out daily, to enable them to get the responses that are relevant to you up on the site faster every day. So inadvertently, you're all using AI today if you're using the Vixio product, because we're trying to speed that up. We've got a very important principle that nothing will ever get published unless one of our analysts have looked at it first, regardless of how we use the AI tool. So you can kind of take that as read. And then we've started to introduce some AI tools in the front end that you might see, a VIQ tool. I'm going to show you some ideas today that we've got. But again, it will only ever look at information that has been verified and qualified by a Vixio analyst. And I think that's really, really important to state. So this is your workspace. Let's build it together. I can't wait to show you what it can do, but I'm going to let Emma just give you a quick 5-minute overview, and then I'll talk some more.
Cute. While I get that up, I feel very compelled to challenge something that Jen and Anushka mentioned. In a good way. You said that you've brought these ideas to your product team. They weren't sexy, they weren't exciting. Ironically, I've joined Vixio specifically to build this product, to solve those problems. So I completely disagree. It is a big it's exciting from a product perspective to help you solve these problems. So what am I going to do? I'm starting here. Let me refresh. Okay, I got to log in. So we've talked about what Workspace is, or we've not talked about what Workspace is. We've mentioned it a lot, but what does that actually mean? What are the core components of the product? I'm going to quickly take you through that right now. I was logged in before, and now I've been logged out. All right, here we go. So I log into Workspace, and this is my landing page. We've got a dashboard, which gives you an overview of all of your projects or checklists. The main purpose behind this dashboard is, right, you log in the morning, you think, what's happened since I last was logged in? What happened overnight? What happened yesterday? Is there anything I need to jump on immediately? Is there anything blocked? What do I need to prioritize today? And in here, you can see very quickly, there's been recent activity on 13 different tasks. You can see I've got 3 different checklists or projects here as well. You can see where there's been activity. For example, here, I've got a task blocked. Somebody who is in this checklist is blocked. I need to jump in there and start taking a look. Before we get into too many details, I just wanted to talk you through kind of core components. So that was your dashboard. Then we can click into a particular project. So in a particular project, you've got, again, the same stats here. And you can see a list of all of the tasks that you have within that project. We'll take you through in a small while how you create those tasks. And then on here, we've got a specific task. So you click into the task, and the idea here is you've got very detailed information on, and it was a point that I can't remember who from the panel mentioned, but what do I need to do? When do I need to do it by? What was the output? And who is assigned? So very, very specific points here, so you can assign a user. Claire Donnelly is actually me. It's just my middle name, but I needed a demo user. But for example, I can assign this to Stephen Lavelle. There's a due date where you can specifically tell the assignee when they need to do it by. And then up here, we can very specifically add details on exactly what do they need to do. So this could be impact assessment, for example. And then, very importantly, each task contains the content underneath. So that's directly from the Vixio Workspace, but we'll go into a bit more detail on how that gets pushed in a second. And then a few more points on what you will see. So when each of you log into your payment compliance or gambling compliance, we've got a brand new screen here on the home page. So this will give you an overview of all of your workspace projects or checklists. And from here, you can access Workspace directly. And then you will also start seeing, for example, I'm going to go into horizon scanning. So this is regulatory updates on the gambling side. You'll start seeing new buttons appear around Workspace saying add to checklist. And that's where you can start adding in the content from the Vixio site. Before I go into demoing those flows, Stephen is going to first give you a quick overview of our use cases. Stephen?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, thank you. I think actually this slide's kind of a waste of time now because the panel covered nearly everything on it, so really helpfully. But it does two things actually. It talks about the sort of conversations we had when we sat down with everyone and we said, what do you do? And we tried to map out this kind of picture of what was going on, and it was kind of what happens upstream, like where is all the noise and inputs coming from? You know, it could be internal, it could be external, and I think we've tried to capture some of those things on the side there. And one of the things I learned from that is whenever I'm having a bad day, I sit down and talk to one of my customers, and I realise actually I have it quite easy compared to some of you guys. So it makes me feel a little bit better. And then what happens downstream, and what do you have to do with that once you've completed those tasks? And then what do we put in the middle that enables you to kind of manage that effectively? I've highlighted a couple of bits here. The colour is a bit weird. So the greeny sort of colour shows you what we're demoing today and what's kind of live in the product. And the light bluey type colour is showing you some other things that we've got in the near and short-term roadmap and how we're thinking about evolving that. And I think it's really important that the middle bit is about bringing in the Vixio information and the data that's really relevant, really important to you, that you're getting alerted to, or it's relevant to a query you've had from one of your colleagues or to a project you're trying to build out. Integrate that data in and enable you to quickly synthesize that data with whoever you need to synthesize it to. And I think one of the really important parts of Workspace is the licensing model of it. So we've got two user levels. Effectively, there are the Workspace owners, so these people can create checklists, they can create tasks, they can assign tasks out to people, and they're really managing that throughput. And we see that as the core compliance team's responsibility. And then there's kind of collaborator licenses. Now, these are totally unlimited and free, and that means you're not restricted on who you can share these tasks out to, internally, inside your organisation and outside of your organisation. And that's because we want you to be able to cast this net far and wide to make sure you cover enough people. We can show you a bit more about that as well. So we're trying to do lots of things today, and Ema's going to show you a couple of those pieces today on how you feed data in, we can triage it, we can track and assign it. And what we're really hoping is enable you to keep on top of things that are critical, what's at risk and what's done. And then downstream of that, you'll be able to use it in project management, managing your teams, managing your external stakeholders, also attestation, showing what has been done and being able to show an audit trail on how it's been done as well. We're thinking about things in the future, about integration. Lots of people have talked to us about, we've got this system, could you integrate with that, either upstream or downstream of this tool? And the answer is yes, we can, and we are looking at that, and that's definitely on the roadmap. We're already thinking about those things. And I think someone said it earlier, actually, is that the ultimate goal for Workspace becomes the single source of truth for your regulatory change efforts. And if we can do that, I think we've really built something valuable for everyone, both in this room and across the compliance space. So Ema's going to jump in again now and show you a couple of use cases on how we can use that tool in our day-to-day world. But as you're watching it, if you can think of some other things, come and talk to us about it, and we'll happily sort of talk about how that could happen as well.
Alrighty. Okay, a hot topic from our panel seemed to be the volume of changes coming in, and how do you manage those? How do you make sure you don't miss anything? How can you disseminate that information around the organisation and make sure everybody who needed to see it has seen it and has taken action? So I'm going to start on the Horizon scanning screen here, which are a list of regulatory updates. And I'm going to pull out one topic. So I'm going to use DORA in the EU, just so we can set the context behind kind of what a compliance manager might be doing. So we go in here and I've got my compliance manager hat on. I see that there's been a new update from Belgium. It came out on the 28th of April. I might normally go in here, I might copy and paste it, send it around in an email. That email may go into the abyss, it might get replied, it might get forwarded, it might get downloaded, it might get put into a spreadsheet somewhere or added to a share drive. Instead of doing that, what you can now do is directly from within Vixio, you can click Add to Checklist. Now, I already have, and you've seen it a second ago, a project which is tracking all of my updates on DORA. So I can add it to that. Even if I don't have the time to dig into it right now, I can push it in there immediately so that I know I need to go and take an action on that later. That's done. And then I can push it in here. And what I can do at this stage, so you can see it's here, it's been added. I can very easily, if I need to start bringing other people in, saying, you know, are we, well, no, I assume you'd know if you were live in Belgium, but which of our products does this impact? Which of our teams does this impact? You know, are we really at risk here if we don't do anything? You can start collaborating directly here within a task. So for example, I could say, Stephen, he's going to kill me because I spelled it wrong. Stephen.
PH, how dare you?
Are we impacted by this, and which teams? Complete example. But I'm going to assign it to Stephen. Importantly, I can also start bringing in other people. So on this project, I can start adding people like Dahlia. It wouldn't be a demo if something didn't go wrong on the front end. Let me try that again. Here we go. So in this checklist, I've got Dahlia and Stephen. I can add a few more people. So I am going to add, let's say, Tanya. Tanya also needs to be involved. I can add her to this checklist. And that means that you've got very tight controls. So Stephen's comment here about the users you can add is not just limited to those who already have access to Vixio today. You can add your downstream teams. So you can add your product teams, your legal teams, you can add sales, whoever needs to be involved in evaluating kind of any changes that are coming in. What you can also do is see how many tasks they've assigned. So it gives you an idea of what is their workload right now.
I've got so many tasks.
You're an important man, Stephen. So then once we go back out of here, the tool is quite flexible, right? You can use a project to quickly push in some of the updates that you need to take further action on. But then I wanted to show you an example of one where you can go deeper. So this isn't a checklist to track multiple different updates coming in. This is a checklist which is being used to action end-to-end the changes that come out of the back of this update. So that is, for example, assessing impact, a few of the points that Stephen mentioned just now on gap analysis. You can add whichever tasks you need to Workspace today and assign it to the relevant people. Example would be in here, where I've got impact assessment. You can add exactly what you need them to do. And then, let's say if I'm going to go back out here, and I want Stephen, okay. Stephen, I'm going to bring you in here.
More work.
On here, I want to assign this to you because you love a good roadmap. So what this means is I'm able to assign it directly to Stephen. Stephen will get a notification, an email, directly into his inbox to tell him he's got a brand new task assigned to him. When he comes in here, he's got full access to this checklist. So he can see the original regulatory content, and everything that happens on the back of that update is tracked here in one single audit trail. So from a regulator's perspective, you can come in, if they come in and say, what did you do on the back of this change? You've got everything. You've got all of the actions that were taking place. You've got the downstream implementation where Stephen can come in here and update. Stephen, have you done your task?
Let's see.
Oh, here we go. So Stephen can come in here and collaborate directly on it. He can add files and he can start marking it up here as complete. So once it's complete, it can come in here and I will automatically then start getting the updates to say that's now complete. He can tell me if he's blocked in any way and he can attach kind of evidence of his, whatever the task assigned him to do. So this is a roadmap, he could put a link to the roadmap. Basically provides an end-to-end audit trail so that it's not spread across emails and Jira boards and project management tools and Excel.
One thing to note, we've made it mobile friendly, so it's designed to being able to use it on your desktop, or if you're on the move, if you've got 10 minutes, you're waiting for a train or a plane or whatever, you can just go in and see what actions you need to take them really quickly. And also that dissemination of information is really mobile as well, because people can just read on their phones and pick it up like they would in any other email.
Cool. Just to quickly say, as and when the assignees are going in and updating those tasks, I can then see these dashboard tiles being updated both at the checklist level and at my dashboard so that I stay up to date on exactly what's happening. Now, there's one more area I'd like to just demo to you, and that is...
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press. There was another point made earlier about how people are based across multiple jurisdictions, trying to keep up to date with all of the requirements, trying to launch quickly is really important in terms of a competitive edge. And understanding that at a granular level of what do I need to do is really important. A few of the other comments I've heard from Discovery was, how can I make this scalable? For example, if I've got an advertising campaign, do I really want to implement one for the UK, one for Ireland, one for France? That's not very scalable. So understanding in a very structured way, what are the requirements and comparing them across jurisdictions that I might be looking to enter or I might be looking to spin up a new project on or an advertising campaign. Here, I've gone into Vixio's report builder and I've got, I want to understand the specific regulatory requirements for online gambling across regulatory markets. You can see here, we've got a few different groups of requirements, but I'm just interested in, let's say, advertising, technical, and licensing. So I'm evaluating this market for entry. Have you selected? There we go, sorry. And licensing. Here we go. And once you identify what requirements you actually want to evaluate, I can come down here and say, I'm already live in Mexico and I now want to evaluate going live in Brazil. How similar are the requirements across those two jurisdictions? I can create a custom report that would bring up the requirements side by side for both of those. So you can see here, are licensed operators permitted to advertise, and you've got the content directly per jurisdiction. Now our favorite next step is what do you do next? You can create a checklist for that. So you can specifically select the topics, so the requirement groups you want to add to it, and you can create a checklist from this. What that does is when you then push that into Workspace, you can start disseminating that information across multiple teams so that the marketing team can start planning their work. You can start seeing if you can even scale a marketing initiative. The technical compliance team can evaluate across markets and compare it directly to a market you're already live in. Sorry, did that by mistake. Cool. Stephen, next, do you want to start talking about what's next for?
Yep.
Or is there anything else?
No, I think that's good. I think let's just jump back into the presentation. Yep. So that's a really high-level overview of Workspace, and these demos are done best in person, one-to-one. We can show you lots of different features and functionality, lots of different way of pulling information in.
I have the first one. I'm Victoria Fernandez. I'm from Cambi, and I do relate with all the Excel not being great for that. We had to move away from it because too much text in it, you can make big mistakes and erase things accidentally. So we moved away to Confluence, which is our intranet. We are live in 60 regulated markets with our partners now. So for us, even if the regulators, they want to imprint their personality in the regs, there is really a lot of overlap. So when we create these templates and then I go around my teams and ask tech compliance or operational compliance, can you list what are your controls for each one of the requirements? The task is really good, but do you have any plans to map those requirements out? Because you have the report that you showed, which I use already, my team uses already, but it will show you the requirements, but we won't tell you where they overlap. And this has been my dream scenario, to have a matrix where all the overlaps are, so I don't need to duplicate work.
Where they overlap, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, you mean?
Yeah, for instance, if you have a jurisdiction, one simple example, very common, a jurisdiction that would not allow bets on under 18. And it's the Article X in a jurisdiction and Article 20 in another one with a different language. So if this is something you ever thought about?
Yeah, yes it is, okay. Yes. So we do, we have on our technical compliance product, we have the requirements and the obligations laid out, and you can run them through the report builder, and you can compare and contrast. And yes, going forward, what we want to do is be able to tell you two things. One is where do they differ? What's the change in that? Where do they differ? But then equally, what we've heard from customers, they also want us to tell them the gotcha the thing that you might not have caught when you were reading the 1,500-page document that you're looking through. So we're trying to pull out kind of three things. One is when a regulation does change, we want to pull that out for you, show you exactly what has changed so you can compare and contrast. Two, show you the requirements, the obligations, so you can compare and contrast. And then three, through our regulatory analysis, is to kind of highlight, hey, this could really get you called out, right? This could get you into trouble. Those were kind of the three use cases or the three problems that customers have told us over and over again where they'd like to get some support.
Just to add to that, the next phase that Stephen mentioned, where we're looking at putting more structured workflows into the tasks, that includes those levels like structuring. Requirement A is in Brazil. And as we look through that, I am thinking about how we can make that clearer and easier to say, as you're going through that from Mexico, we can go and say, actually, this looks like requirement A from Brazil. So it helps you to start kind of mapping out exactly where is there overlap or where requirements quite similar, and it would be the same in terms of obligations as well.
Yeah, that would help teams to actually answer things
Yeah.
once, and
Exactly.
not 15
Yeah.
times.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'm just here. Hang on, you need a mic.
Yeah, I was
Wait for the mic. There you go.
actually you answered the first one, because my first question was how much Workspace requires any kind of integration. The answer to that is it doesn't really.
It doesn't now. So right now it works out of the box, but we're not ignoring that, and we're not ignoring the fact that this will need to play nice with other systems, right? Because we work in a complicated world, and there are other departments and other systems that it may need to talk to. So we are looking at how it can integrate in the right way with other tools. But it is designed to work independently without any integration, so you can get up and running. And then as complexity arises, we're going to build those integrations as we go.
Lovely. That was my second question, was how does it actually integrate with platforms like Trello? How do you take that next step?
I think we need to look at what systems it works with. I think with something like Trello, I'd see it replacing Trello. One of the views we didn't give you was a very Trello-esque card view where you can drag and drop tasks across and do project management. And I think that what we tried to do very much from the outset was say there are all of these kind of blank canvas tools that you can use, like Trello, like Google Sheets, like all sorts of stuff. But you have to think about how you're going to use them, and then that becomes a management job of its own. Just kind of designing that, making sure everyone's using it in the same way. So Workspace should make that simple, because this is about regulatory update management, right? And that's the job at hand, and it does that job. So that's the first thing. I think that what's really important, though, is upstream and downstream. We know that information is coming from multiple places, not just Vixio, even though Vixio is the best source of all information, obviously, because of the work that Roseanne does and her team does. But there are other inputs, right? And so how do we get those inputs into Workspace? I think that's super important. And then we know that downstream of Workspace, there are evidence requests, there are management information reports you have to create. You might have to go and report to the board. You might have to do lots of stuff that you want to produce downstream, and that could be in our system, but it could also be in other systems, and we'll look at integrations there as well. But not necessarily to get the value.
Okay. Anyone else would like to do this program? They'll warn you, but I can't as well. So.
Let's hear from some non-Vixio people.
I was actually going to ask on the report builder, because that is live. We haven't seen that.
Told you it's hot off the press.
Went out this morning.
Literally went live this morning.
The demo you provided there was on the payments compliance platform.
Yep.
Can I assume that's live on the gambling compliance platform?
You can.
It is indeed.
I'm actually asking for a client exhibit.
It is live on both of the platforms, yes. Yeah. Another question over there.
Yeah.
No, I just need you now. In relation to the regulatory updates that you will provide within the workspace, is there any level of assurance from you that everything's there? because can I stop doing everything that I'm doing and fully rely on this and be sure that I'm not missing anything? So that's question number one. There's another thing is that we have experienced as suppliers that not all the information is available on the website. Some regulators are great, others are terrible. And they will provide information to some, not to others, licensees. So this kind of information, how you're getting hold of it?
Yeah, I can take that. So your first question, are you capturing everything? Is it? I think so. The short answer is we are capturing. To your point, our information is only as good as the regulators who are publishing things, because we. Part of the bulk of the publications that are on there are from the regulator and competent authorities. Sometimes we have to buy the information from them. So we just, if countries like different countries in Africa, we have to buy some of the information. So we're getting it, I know, straight from the regulator. Others we will research it. To your point around countries where they're not so transparent, we will develop relationships with local council or with consultants in the area. So Israel is a jurisdiction that we have built up a network in, because they come out with things, it's not really clear on what it is or who it is. I think in terms of, look, we are the one source of truth. That's how a number of our customers describe us, but they would never rely on one source for that, right? And I don't think it's good practice to have one source of truth. So we complement or tend to they use us for validation of other sources that they might have. While we do our best to be comprehensive, we are only as good as what we get from the regulators. You're welcome.
Paresh Rogani from Play and Go. Have you actually talked to any regulators to see if they like Workspace?
Got one in the room. No, not yet. I think it's fair to say it's a good question. I think we will but we've certainly talked to some people representing the regulators in the development of it. So not since we've launched it. And I think, we are going into that phase now where it's out in the wild, and now we are trying to talk to as many people as possible just to make sure it does everything it needs to do. One of the things you'd have seen on one of my slides was around the reporting capabilities of it. And I think part of that reporting capabilities, we've built the system to capture every single event possible. And now it's a case of what actually needs to come out of that into a report that would be substantial enough to attest that something is correct and in place, and that's part of the conversations we're having now.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what the regulators that audit the compliance departments would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like this.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I think on Boogie's kind of guidance, I think we'll be much more proactively kind of doing it, so we'll be able to feed that back as we get that feedback directly from them as well.
It's a great comment.
Months. Yeah.
And it goes for both internal and external audit.
Can I just...
Yeah.
Can I just comment on that one? I think it's extremely important, also in the line with what you asked, to make sure actually that the many regulators as possible that you can reach out to, or really sort of like, well, you can hardly ever get a regulator to put a blue stamp on anything else but their own stuff. But you can at least get them to realize what this is about. And they can actually start using it themselves, right? And that would be more or less the best recommendation you could ever get, right? And you could, of course, also ask them throughout like half a year and so forth, how is it working out and how do you make use of it, and have you seen operators use it or misuse it or misunderstand it somehow? So I think it's key, really, also for all of you to wishing to use it actually, that the regulators recognize it and respect that you have done an effort to stay on top and actually get the good stuff from the right sources, right? So, and as what we just said, Sarah said, well, you're as good as you can get the news, right? So if the regulator tells you something wrong, I mean, we are all sort of in a bad place. But that is the best you can do. And sometimes in the world, you can't really never know if that will ever be the truth or not, right? So this is the world we live in. But I agree, we need to get regulators, and I think I would approach the associations as well, right? and get some time there to show them and prove to them how workable this really is and how valuable it can be also to regulators. But then, of course, you need to also put in some more facilities that actually speaks to regulators, right? So they would like to have a space where they have emails from operators and all sort of issues and cases from operators coming in so that they can sort out that they work in a good way as well. So the more you can sort of involve regulators in working more or less in the same line, in the same way, it will benefit all of us, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good feedback. Thank you.
Oh.
Hi, Zsuzsa Sajnos Baliz. You talked about workspace owners and unlimited collaborator licenses. What user interface will the collaborators see? So if I send something to the marketing team, will they see the same interface as the workspace owners?
Yes.
So will they have like login, they need to log in?
Yeah, so you will be able to add them into Workspace. They will get an email and then they're able to sign up and log in. They see the exact same thing that you do. It's just that they will be restricted from doing things like creating projects and obviously from accessing the Vixio core platforms kind of with the regulatory intelligence, so creating checklists from there. But what they will be able to do is fully action tasks within that project and see the original.
Yeah, I think it's important to say they see what you've allowed them to see.
Yes.
Not everything that's in there. So you would have your view. They would only see the tasks that have been assigned to them and the checklist that you've allowed them to see. So so it would be a limited version of it.
My other question is that the workspace owner licenses, will they be in any relationship with our current Vixio licenses, or there will be a completely different product with completely different licenses?
There will be some crossover of both, so we're expecting that there will be a natural sort of crossover, but then there may be other teams who will need to own specific tasks and will need their own sort of separate sort of licenses, but it will be harmonised most commonly.
I think the one thing just to emphasize and say out loud, because I think it's something that makes Workspace unique, is around your point around the collaboration. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that we got from customers during the development was, can my legal counsel get it, my external counsel, right, can they have access to it? And the answer was yes, right, that we were given it. So I think, so that's really unique about the tool that we have. And again, just to kind of reiterate Stephen's point, we built this for you, with you. And so we really took on that feedback. As you think about your pain points, right, and kind of the duplication of effort, those were some of the things that came in, and I think that's one of the things that makes it quite unique and special. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us at this virtual screening of Vixio Workspace. If you'd like to see a demo of this product, please reach out to your account manager or drop us a note at info@vixio.com and the team would be delighted to show you this new tool.